stuck here. The cops won't bother me. Hey guys, I wanted to show you my Xr650r, and this is kind of a special bike, and I don't think a lot of people realize how special this is. I really admire Honda, and I'm not really like a Honda fanboy. I'm not a fan of any particular brand, but now that I look at it, I've had over 40 bikes, and this is my second Xr650r. My first Xr650r that I had, I used it primarily just for dirt riding. And I had the 21-inch wheels and all the goodies, and it was a really difficult bike to ride well off-road for a beginner like me. This one is in supermoto form, and it's a very good bike for supermoto and a street bike. Most of these bikes have been legalized because it is an old bike. You're looking at a 20-year-old bike. This is an Xr650r from the year 2000. So they made them from 2000 all the way to 2007. And one of the common questions I get is this the same as the 650L? And it has nothing to do with the 650L. I think Honda made a mistake by naming it so closely to the 650L. The 650L is a great bike, and I don't want to put it down because I do want one as well. I never had a 650L, but it's a very different bike than this. This is a off-road bike. The 650L is an air-cooled dual sport, and it's much heavier. It doesn't have the power that this has. The geometry of this is much more rigid. This one is just an incredible bike. And I was thinking about Honda bikes, and when you look at a lot of the bikes that Honda makes, they do have a cult-like following. And this Xr650r has got a cult-like following. There's a dedicated ownership that comes with this bike, and you can kind of see why when you're riding it. It's a 20-year-old bike, and it's still reliable. It starts all the time. You know, I did have some issues with it starting a while ago because the valves were out of spec, but this thing is just an incredibly good bike that's reliable. And it's the type of bike that when I look at Honda, and I also have a 1995 Honda Africa Twin. So for the longest time, Honda didn't make a new Honda Africa Twin, and they're making these bikes now that are kind of bringing back nostalgia to the people that have them. That's why I think the Xr650r is going to be coming back, because Honda does realize how cult-like of a following this thing has gotten. And in the XR family, this is probably the most memorable one, and I'm going to say it that this is probably one of Honda's finest motorcycles that they've ever created. It's got a lot of things going for it. One of the things that I keep getting is, oh yeah, I need a BMW, I need a Ducati because it's got soul. Well, you're looking at a bike that's got soul from Honda. This bike, when you ride it, you realize it's something special. It feels very much unlike any other bike that you would get. It feels very different than a CRF 450, the WR, like a KTM. This is a very solid performer. It, of course, it's a little outdated today in 2020. You know, it's 20 years old, so of course it's not going to have all the goodies that the new bikes have. But this bike is very difficult to find these days because the owners do keep them. And I've seen Xr650r owners that have, you know, they have like 4 or 5 Xr650s in their garage. They really love these things and they're holding on to them. And one of the things that you're finding is that the prices on these have been climbing up recently, and a lot of it has to do because, yeah, people are into like the adventure market, and the adventure market's been saturated with these bikes that are grotesquely large and heavy, and you're really not able of doing any sort of adventuring when you have a bike like that. I know that you can ride a Africa Twin or GS off-road, and have a decent time at it. But this is a true bike for off-roading. This thing could go cross-country from DC to California in dirt roads. That's the beauty of it. And I know a couple of guys that are doing the Trans-America Trail, so there's like a large amount of aftermarket for this bike. This bike has got outfitted with just about everything. They even make under-seat gas tanks that increase the amount of range that this thing gets. Now, one thing you're going to be noticing about the XR650 is that it is a gas guzzler. And when you ride this thing, as soon as you hear it, you realize why it's a gas guzzler. It's just a super powerful single-cylinder bike that uses up a lot of gas. And you always have to be on the lookout for that. Now, a lot of these have been street legal over the years. There's hardly any that you're going to find without a title and a street legal kit, because that's the beauty of this particular bike. It's probably one of the better dual sports you can possibly get, especially if you're aiming more towards the dirt rather than the street. But because of the climbing prices, and a lot has to do with the supermoto crowd and the stunting crowd realizes that this is the bike to get. Like, you don't want to get like a CRF450 because it requires much more maintenance. This one does not require much maintenance at all. It's the type of bike that you could always like hop on, kickstart it, and it'll work. That is one of its downsides, but the kickstart, this is a brutal kickstart to start, and I don't particularly mind it too much because it's a very easy bike to start once you know the procedure. But because there's so many bikes now with electric starts, a lot of people don't even see this anymore. And of course, it's very easy to maintain. The valves on this use a very simple process for measuring, and I really appreciate that. When I was looking at DRZ 400s, CRF 250s, they all use the shims, and that makes it much more difficult and time consuming to do, and much more expensive if you take it to a dealer. Now, this bike you can keep for years and years, but of course it is getting kind of old. Honda's got this pattern of bringing back old popular bikes that they haven't made for quite some time. One is, of course, the Honda Africa Twin. There was a period that Honda did not make it, but the demand was there for the Africa Twin. And if you go to Europe, and I have one in Europe, a 95 Africa Twin, and the prices on those are extraordinarily high. You will see an Africa Twin for 4,000 euros, the V-Twin version. So, and a lot of people love them. You know, I rode an Africa Twin across Europe several times, and everywhere I went, people really loved that bike. So Honda went from a period of not making that bike because the sales, I guess, weren't good, and they discontinued it and they brought it back. So then they have the Honda Monkey, and then they have the new Super Cub. So they're bringing back all of these bikes that are extremely popular now because of the adventure market, and there's a lot more people getting into motorcycling, especially with this pandemic that's going around. People are more interested in riding now than they were in the past, especially in the DC area where I live. There are lots of people that take public transportation, but yet nowadays very few are taking public transportation and relying more on motorcycles and scooters. And bicycles. Bicycling around here is very popular as well. There's also like the Honda Element. It's one of my favorite cars. Honda has got a very different way of making vehicles. Now when I look back at cars, I do realize what they're doing. They're building things, and they're like looking more into the future. Because I think cars like the Honda Element have appreciated value. The S2000, that's a car that actually kind of goes back to the early heritage of Honda, and they brought it back. The Element, of course, is not made yet, but I do believe that it's going to be made fairly soon because there is a cult-like following. So where there's a cult-like following, Honda does pay attention, and I believe that the Honda Xr650r is one of the greatest motorcycles you can get. And I think Honda is going to bring it back. A lot of the adventure guys are going towards the 700s. There's already the Tenere. The Tenere has not been a popular seller in the 1200cc form. Way too heavy, way too top heavy. That's something that Yamaha tends to make. They make bikes that are top heavy. Even the FJR 1300 that I had was extremely top heavy. The trend now in the adventure market is to stop making these bulky, heavy bikes that you really can't take off-road unless you're just taking them on gravel roads for most people. Most people are not going to be doing crazy off-roading, but there are nutters that ride the Xr650r in single tracks and they keep up with the tiniest of bikes. This thing is just incredibly fun off-road if you can handle it. It requires a real man to ride this off-road. This is going to bring this back, I'm pretty sure, as a CRF 700. I bet it's going to have fuel injection, electric start, and probably some other goodies. I think it's going to resemble the Yamaha Tenere 700 more than the KTM 790 with all the electronics. And I believe they're going to keep the costs low, and they're going to make it comparable to the Tenere 700. And I think that's going to be a very popular seller for Honda, because Honda does make these very incredible bikes, and this is probably one of the more incredible ones you can get. I think Honda did a slam dunk with this one. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.